Our next speaker will be Heather Davis.
Good evening. I'm Heather Davis, and I'm still committed to speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves. Last week, I sat in the living room of my children's grandparents, longtime Kaufmanites. One had graduated Powell High in 1965, and the other one was one of the first graduating classes, integrated classes of KHS in 1967. They are family members of a well-known black family-owned business, where the front door of their business looks upon the Confederate soldier, a statue in the square. They spoke with me about what I was involved in concerning this statue, and I briefly told them my position. The patriarch of the family bowed his head and walked from the room, unable to speak upon it. His wife cried. We held hands for a few moments, and I come to know that for so many years they have felt, as many black families in Kaufman do, that they have no voice in Kaufman County, despite owning successful businesses. They felt accepted only in the town as long as they maintain the present notion to stay in your lane, do not speak up and do not speak out, and your business will be okay. This mindset has been passed down from generation to generation, and we're speaking of a black community who feels defeated and unable to express the hurt and desperation of the 530 slaves scattered throughout Kaufman County. So according to Jack Stoltz, East Texas Historical Association, he said this: when Abraham Lincoln won the presidency of the United States in November 1860, the die was cast. Most Southerners were determined that succession was the only recourse, and within a month of the elections, the Texas leaders called for succession convention in early 1861. Isham Chisholm was elected to represent Kaufman County at the convention. And on January 28th, the convention assembled in Austin. And on February 1st, a resolution of succession was adopted and sent to the people for ratification, which was spoke of earlier this evening. There were citizens in the state who strongly opposed such action, but the statewide vote on February 23rd was overwhelmingly in favor for leaving the Union. The citizens of Kaufman County voted in favor 461 A's to 155 nays, a 3-to-1 margin. When the convention reassembled after the balloting, William Nash replaced Chisholm as the delegate from Kaufman County. So even before the final vote for succession had been taken, the Commissioner's Court took its first step to prepare to deal with the potential problems and to ensure domestic tranquility. In the county at the time, there were over 500 slaves, 530.
Time, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is James Peeler. Excuse me, Jay, what city are you from?
I live in Kaufman City, actually out in the county, in between here and Scurry.
Thank you.
First, I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I am an adult citizen of the Kaufman County. I spent over 22 years serving our nation in the Marine Corps, ensuring the freedom of all people. I've also continued to serve communities that I live in, wanting to ensure the freedom of all people that live there. I think we can all equally agree that the practice of slavery is abhorrent. I really don't think there are too many people in modern society that would disagree with that. However, one of the things I would disagree with is part of the aspersions as far as our history. It is a very complex history. I think if anybody tried to say with a serious face that slavery was not a part of the Civil War, that would be patently false. However, it would be equally false to state that that was the only reason for war that divided our nation. I come from a family that's been here since before the Revolution. I have family members 4 generations deep in the state of Texas. I have met family members that fought on both sides of a tragic war. And while slavery was undoubtedly one of the causes behind that war, unfair tax policies that unfairly targeted Southern farmers was also one of the factors leading to that war. There are a lot of different reasons. There are a lot of people that fought for reasons other than slavery. They fought for the freedom of their state from Northern aggression because the North did come into the South. Now, I'm not disputing the wrong notion of one man owning another. As I've already said, that's something that is a horrible practice. But one of the things that I did learn in my 22 years of service is people serve and fight for many different reasons. To paint with a broad brush everybody who serves for any one given cause would be foolish. To that, I say, when we look at Winston Churchill's comment when he was paraphrasing George Santayana, he said that those who fail to learn from their history are condemned to repeat it, and that's true. Abraham Lincoln himself, when having his portrait did, and the painter asked him how he wanted to present Abraham Lincoln, he said, "Just as I am, warts and all." Granted, we have some warts in our history, but they are important things for us to learn from. So when I see a war monument, I don't just see one thing that points out the slavery, which I feel very deeply in my heart for the families that see that, but I see that also as a teachable moment, because we can look on that and see how far we've come. Likewise, it represents other things to other families. For example, a lot of people don't consider the fact. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Lynn Combs. What city you live in?
I live in Post Oak Bend.
Post Oak? Thank you.
Yes. I've been to almost all these meetings, and I just want to thank everyone serving on this commission. You've done a really good job, and your service has been a model of service for this county, and I mean it, and I sincerely appreciate it. A couple of recurrent themes have shown up that I think deserve some consideration. The big one that I think we don't fully understand is this idea that keeps surfacing, that the monument is part of history and you can't change history. This simply is false. The past is the past and nothing can change it. The word history actually comes from the Greek word historia, which means inquiry. History is not the past. Rather, it's our attempt to interpret and explain the past. History is thus constantly subject to the forces of revision. And in our case, not only is it subject to revision, it has been successfully revised by many groups, some of which have representatives here tonight, keen to minimize the cruelties of slavery and the sting of Southern defeat. Every time we hear about states' rights, every time we hear about tariffs, every time we hear about the gradual phasing out of slavery or things about diminishing the role of slavery in the Civil War, you're hearing the success of those attempts at revision. And now a number of speakers have also made an analogy to the statue, analogy of our statue with Auschwitz. With due respect, this is an extremely hurtful analogy. Like Black Americans, the Jews in Auschwitz were largely the innocent victims of state-sanctioned violence and repression. Indeed, it's well documented that when the Nazis rose to power, they modeled their own race laws on those in effect at the time in the US South. But the memorial plaques at Auschwitz don't celebrate the glory of the Nazi cause, as our statue does that of the Confederacy. The victims of that tragedy demanded that that site of genocide be preserved, precisely to stop the very kind of historic revisionism that we still suffer from here and now. Indeed, the proper analogy would be if in the 1990s Germany had had a Nazi revival and put Nazi commemorative statues in front of their courthouses, celebrating the glory of the Third Reich. Now, far from any battlefield, our statue is a monument to the Confederacy and all of its sins, from slavery to treason against the United States. It names no soldier. It commemorates no battle. And its purpose was less to preserve the past than to hide it. I hope and trust that these are lessons we may finally learn, and I thank the Commission.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Kevin Mcdermott. Kevin, what city are you in?
I live in Heartland, close to Forney.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we have a problem here, and there is a lot of anger and division in our community related to this statue. I believe the purpose of this process, meetings and speakers, has been to create unity in the community, and unfortunately the problem is I don't think we're achieving that. It's difficult to achieve because people have entrenched opinions on both sides. If you want the statue removed, you tend to see it as a sign of racism, and therefore anyone who supports the statue must at some level be racist. If you want the statue to stay, you see people who are trying to remove it as people who are trying to erase history. And what ends up happening is both sides are demonizing each other. And so regardless of whether the statue ultimately stays or goes, I believe we are not accomplishing the goal of unity, we're accomplishing the problem of division. So I do want to give some hope. I think there are some solutions that may promote unity. First, I think we need to be willing to see the other side's perspective and not demonize them. If you want the statue gone, don't assume people are racist if they don't want it gone. If you want to keep the statue, don't assume the other side is trying to erase your history. Other solutions I would recommend, we need to clarify the inscription on the statue. If you want to keep the statue, which I do, by the way, I think we need to keep it. I do think we should clarify the inscription where it says we are honoring the cause. To the extent that that cause was slavery and racism, it is abhorrent. We cannot honor that. We should, I believe, add a plaque to clarify we are not supporting that. I think another good solution we can offer, instead of removing the statue, is we can add a new monument to honor a black hero from Kaufman County, William Mcdonald. I don't know if anyone is familiar with him, but he grew up in Kaufman County right after the Civil War. And his father was a slave owned by the Grand Master of the KKK. He had every reason to be resentful and to hate white people, but he didn't choose that path. Instead, he chose to adopt a path of unity. He became a leader in the Republican Party of Texas, leading a biracial group of whites and blacks. He became a very successful businessman, to the point that when the Great Depression hit and white businesses were struggling, he helped them. He bailed them out. So he did not harbor resent. He did not call people racist. He helped people. And I don't see why we can't do that. So we should clarify the inscription, add a new statue to honor William Mcdonald, see other people's perspectives, and last, I recommend, let's get it on the ballot. I know we've discussed this and apparently been told we can't do that. If that's true, let's take our time, let the state legislature change that law. Let people have a voice on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, I'm going to kind of break the rules here. The rules that JC and I set. Putting something on the ballot we have been trying to do is a state law, evidently, that if you're a county with over a certain population, you cannot put anything on the May 2021 ballot. It has to be a constitutional amendment, comes through the House, through, I would assume, your state representatives. I've talked to Keith Bell, and he said go somewhere else and go back to the county. So
That can be a constitutional amendment. It can be a bill, just plain.
yeah, just to plan. Yeah, but anyway, we've been trying to get something done there, and so far all we've been told is no, you cannot put it on the ballot. So I don't know what to do. Okay. Our next speaker, oh, Jay.
I would advise you to write or call your representative. It's one thing hearing from one or two people off a committee, but you are the voters. So you call them and request that to be put on the ballot. He sent it back to the county. Once it got to him, he sent it back and told the county to do what the county can't do it. So my advice, if you want it on the ballot, you need to get a hold to your representative.
Thank you, Jesse. Our next speaker will be David Ivey. I believe that's correct.
Good evening. My name is David Ivey. I'm a resident of Forney. I respectfully suggest the Citizens Commission has a moral responsibility to recommend to the commissioners that the Confederate statue be removed from public property. Those who argue for keeping the statue in place argue for tradition, heritage, and history. Yet removing the statue doesn't erase history. The history of the Civil War will still be read about and taught in public schools. Removing the statue doesn't take away anyone's burial ground. No one is buried on that site. Removing the statue doesn't take away Confederate heritage. People can still have clubs and organizations that celebrate that tradition. Confederate memorabilia can still be bought and sold online. Confederate flags can still be flown on trucks and hung at garages. People still have the right to do all these things. Removing the statue doesn't take away anyone's rights. However, keeping the statue in place does continue to infringe upon individual rights. It imposes a divisive symbol on public land. At the top of the statue are the letters CSA. The statue is a public celebration of the Confederate States of America. The Confederate Constitution talks about, quote, the inferiority of the Negro and the preservation of the institution of slavery. The Confederacy was on the wrong side of history, took up arms against and killed West Point cadets, and took a dehumanizing position regarding African Americans. Honor and history are important, but it's our responsibility to teach what actually happened, not the statue's whites-only version. If you recommend to the commissioners for removal, you would be giving them the political mandate to do the right thing. You'd be doing the county commissioners a favor by making a bold decision that keeps political pressure off of them. That's why recommending the removal of the statue is a win-win. Nobody loses any rights. More importantly, the argument for removing the statue has moral weight. It is the argument for dignity and respect for all of the citizens of Kaufman County. It is an act of love, which opens up a brighter future for everyone, especially people of color. Removal makes the courthouse a safe place. It builds community. It allows for a sense of belonging for more people. It's about granting life, and wherever we can create life, we are doing the work of God. We speak for removal because we love our country. So yes, we still sing the national anthem. We still salute our brave soldiers and honor our first responders. We will still pledge allegiance to the flag. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Mark Cuban. First question is, are you the owner of the basketball team?
No, sir. Sorry about that.
I apologize.
I'm not going to be able to give you any tickets today. So, first of all, it's ridiculous. The statue doesn't infringe on anybody's rights. What right would it infringe upon? I didn't hear the specific right. It's just a statue. It's ridiculous. The Statue of Liberty infringes on people's rights. The statue of Jesus, of the Virgin Mary, because they're all coming down too. You know that? If it's a white Jesus or a white Virgin Mary, it's coming down. Here's the thing. This wasn't a problem until George Floyd, 6 months ago, overdosed on fentanyl. And then all of a sudden the statue became a problem. And I'll tell you another thing. The statistics The poll in Kaufman County on Facebook was 9 times the amount of people wanted to keep the statue where it is, compared to moving it, and even fewer people wanted to get rid of it. Like 23 times the number of people wanted to keep it than to remove it. Now that's an unofficial poll. I've got the numbers, so I can give it to Mr. Hart. But that's a good representation of our county. We're a Republican county, and Democrats, Black Lives Matters, Antifa are the ones that are behind removing these statues. You know it, I know it, we all know it. Now the next thing, if you're so against slavery, you got to get rid of this monument, why do you still vote Democrat? The Democrats were the party of slavery. Why are y'all voting Democrat if you hate slavery? That's the party of slavery. They didn't get rid of slavery, Republicans did.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Alice Hogue.
What was that? Why do you vote Democrat?
I'm here to keep the monument. It's very important to me, or I wouldn't be fighting for myself and my friends and the county. I found this at a museum this past weekend. Every life lost in war is precious and unique, and incalculable, I struggle on that, incalculable human cost. May the peoples of the world learn to resolve their differences peacefully. That's Major Frederick Arnold, USAAF. But I came across an article again today, and it was written by John Daniel Davidson. This isn't really about Confederate monuments. Nevertheless, a common objection to these statues today is that because they occupy public spaces, they serve to venerate their subjects, who were, of course, racist and fought to preserve slavery. But if we know the history, why can't we see them in a different light? Why shouldn't we view them as we should, as a haunting and cautionary tale? As for as much as lost cause mythology adorns so many of these monuments, their purpose was also to convey to future generations why so many people kept fighting for years and in the face of staggering casualties. For the ordinary soldiers who fought and died, devotion to the Confederate Army did not arise primarily from a devotion to the institution of slavery, just as most Union soldiers were not fighting primarily to end slavery, but from a devotion to their home states and a sense of honor and duty to defend them from what they considered to be an invading army. They were wrong about slavery does not excuse us today from the burden of trying to understand what motivated them to fight and what motivated them and their families to undertake a flurry of monument building decades later as the surviving veterans began to die off. A more mature society would recognize that the past is always with you and must always be kept in mind. If anyone has fought in a war or had a relative that fought, how can you not see the value in a monument recognizing their service? If nothing else, respect our elders. You know, they might be here another 20 years, people that have lived here, and that's part of their lives. Power and strength from within, looking to God for strength. Don't look at the monument for strength. That's not going to happen.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Robert Fair.
I also would like to thank the committee for volunteering to do this job. I know it's a tough one, but thank you. Since our last monument meeting, this is the last monument meeting that the public will get to speak. I have chose to speak on the last word. If I knew that by relocating or destroying the Confederate monument would put an end to all of this business is going on, like bringing up slavery, renaming streets, Washington, Jefferson, Jackson, and taking out the pages of history in the history books that date from, say, 1700 to 1865. If I knew that by tearing this monument down, it would put an end to all of this, and instead unite our country, I'd be up here in the morning with my sledgehammer ready to go to work on that monument. If it would do that, if it would put an end to it. I'm so sick and tired of listening to it, I don't know what to say. But anyway, I would like to, answer the first. But I fear that removing the monument is not going to be the end of it. I think it's going to go on and on and on. I urge that the committee to recommend to the county court, county commissioner's court, that the statue that's been there for almost 100 years, maybe 100, I don't know when it was put up, but it's been there for that length of time, be saved and kept and keep it in the same location as a reminder of what can happen to a country that is divided among itself. Thank you.
Thank you.